The banging on my front door sounded like someone was trying to break in. For a second, half asleep and barely conscious, I thought the house itself was angry. Then I heard her voice. And suddenly, everything made perfect sense. Karen had returned. She was the kind of neighbor who believed the universe had hired her on contract to supervise humanity. Somehow, she had appointed herself as the moral spine of our cul-de-sac, the HOA's spirit animal, and the unofficial Dawn Patrol inspector of everyone else's business. And today, apparently, the apocalypse was my fishing boat. If I had known that leaving the boat in my front yard overnight would summon her at sunrise like some HOA demon whose alarm clock was powered by pure resentment, I might have reconsidered. But then again, maybe not. This was my property. And after months of her nitpicking, insulting, and documenting every harmless thing I owned or breathed near, I had grown tired enough to let the problem come to me. I opened the door to find Karen already mid-rant, waving a thick stack of HOA papers like she was conducting an orchestra of fury. Do you have any idea how many regulations you're violating right now? This boat is an eyesore, a public nuisance. It violates Section 3 and Section 12, and probably Section You're a Terrible Neighbor. It's 6 in the morning, I said. At least let me put on pants before the interrogation. But Karen didn't care. Karen never cared. Her fury was solar-powered, and sunrise only made her stronger. I leaned against the door frame, half amused and half exhausted, while she launched into 18 different reasons why my fishing boat was personally destroying suburban America. She had that look in her eyes, the one people get when they're fueled by a righteous indignation they invented themselves. You need to move it now, she said, stabbing her finger at the ground like she demanded the earth itself confirm her authority. I took a slow breath. It's staying there. She gasped like I had confessed to murder. Then I'm calling the police. Of course she was. Of course she did. And of course I didn't stop her. Because unlike her, I knew something she didn't. I knew exactly why my boat was in the yard. I knew exactly who had put it there. And I knew exactly how badly this was about to backfire. But I kept quiet. Because sometimes justice doesn't need a push. Sometimes it just needs a Karen. 2 hours earlier, before the sun had even risen, before Karen marched across the neighborhood wielding HOA laws like divine scripture, I was awakened by a scraping sound. Not the regular kind of scraping, like a trash bin rolling or a car door opening. This was heavier, slower, almost like something large was being dragged. When I peeked out the window, I saw a shadowy figure in my yard, a shape hunched over, struggling with something. My boat. I recognized the outline instantly. It was my brother-in-law, Kurt. And if I were the kind of man who enjoyed morning chaos, I might have stepped outside then. But he was moving the boat to a better angle for towing, or so I assumed, and he often worked early. It wasn't until later, much later, that the full truth came out. But at the time, I just went back to bed, assuming things were normal. Normal, of course, until Karen's HOA radar detected the slightest irregularity in the neighborhood's aura, and she came knocking like a furious suburban woodpecker. Now, standing in my doorway, I watched her pace with indignation radiating off her like heat waves on asphalt. You are violating multiple HOA regulations, she repeated, as though legal jargon was her native language and rage was her second. Karen, I said, the boat is fine. It'll be gone later. It should not be here now, she snapped. This community has standards. You say that like you invented them. I uphold them. No, I said levelly. You weaponize them. Her eyes widened. She didn't expect pushback. People around here rarely gave her any. Most neighbors avoided conflict the way people avoid stepping on Lego pieces. But not me. Not today. Something in me, maybe fatigue, maybe amusement, decided to let this play out. You can explain it to the officers when they get here, she said smugly. I'd be delighted. When the police cruiser rolled up, Karen practically floated toward them, vibrating with the smug energy of someone who believed justice would personally hug her. She met the officers with the theatrical urgency of a woman reporting international espionage. Officers, thank goodness. This man is deliberately violating HOA regulations, endangering community property values, creating a visual hazard, and refusing to comply. The younger officer blinked. A visual hazard? Yes, she said, gesturing dramatically at my poor, innocent boat, as though it were a flaming wreck blocking traffic. This is a clear violation of the law. Ma'am, he said gently. HOA rules aren't laws. Karen gasped again. Her signature move. The senior officer turned to me. Is this your boat, sir? Yes. And is it usually stored here? No, I said. It was moved early this morning. Karen seized on my words like a hawk spotting prey. See? He admitted it. He admitted wrongdoing. I shook my head. I didn't say it was wrong. Just that it was moved. Illegally moved, Karen insisted. Ma'am, the officer said, moving a boat is not illegal. Well, she stammered, it's against the bylaws. That's, not really our jurisdiction. Karen stared at them, betrayed by the very system she thought she commanded. Then the older officer asked the question that changed everything. Who moved it? I shrugged. I assumed my brother-in-law. But before anyone could respond, the officer stepped around the boat, crouched, and frowned. Sir, he said, did you know your trailer hitch is damaged? My stomach dropped. No, I said. It wasn't damaged last night. He pointed at deep scratches on the metal, fresh gouges that hadn't been there before, long drag marks carved into the lawn, and faint footprints. The younger officer walked along the marks, surveying the lawn before stopping at the edge of Karen's yard. And then his eyebrows shot up. Oh, wow, he said. Officer Hughes, you need to see this. We followed him. There, in Karen's yard, behind her row of hydrangeas, behind the spot where she always lectured people for stepping too close to her flowers, were more drag marks, fresh, leading directly to her backyard gate. And the gate was slightly open. Karen paled. What? What is that? That wasn't there yesterday. Ma'am, Officer Hughes said. Do you store any equipment, tools, or vehicles behind your property? No, she said too quickly. Of course not. My property is immaculate, unlike his. But the officer was already walking toward the gate. Wait, she cried. You can't go back there. Ma'am, he said. Your gate is open, and there are signs of potential property damage and unauthorized movement of heavy equipment. We need to check. No, you can't. This is standard procedure. And then the truth emerged. Behind her backyard, tucked clumsily behind a shed, was a landscaping vehicle. A small one, but powerful enough to tow or drag heavy loads. A vehicle registered to Karen's husband. A vehicle with fresh mud on the tires. Mud the exact same color as the dirt in my yard. And lying beside it carelessly tossed, half-bent, and unmistakable was my trailer's missing hitch pin. The one that held the boat in place. The one that prevented accidents. The one that could have gotten someone killed if the boat rolled into the street. Karen's face drained of color so fast, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her voice cracked. I didn't. That's not. I wasn't. The senior officer turned to her with a look that was almost disappointed. Ma'am, he said calmly, we're going to need you to step over here and explain how this ended up behind your property. I don't need to explain anything, she shouted, her voice breaking. He's the one breaking rules. He left that boat out. He's the problem. But the officers weren't listening, because the evidence spoke louder. And suddenly, everything clicked into place. The dragging, the noise at dawn, the boat being moved without me seeing anyone. Kurt hadn't moved it. Karen had. Or more likely, Karen had attempted to tow it away with the landscaping cart, planning to cite me for improper storage or force me to pay HOA fines or just satisfy some deep itch for control. And in the process, she damaged my property and left the evidence in her own yard. It was the most poetic form of suburban self-destruction I had ever seen. The officers separated us, guiding Karen to the side of her yard while the younger one remained with me. His expression was professional, but I could see the bewilderment behind it. Most cops probably expected noise complaints, minor disputes, maybe the occasional lost dog. But this? A pre-dawn boat heist conducted with a landscaping cart? This was premium HOA insanity. Sir, he said, did you give anyone permission to move your boat? No. Did you give Karen or anyone in her household access to your property? Absolutely not. He nodded, jotting down notes on a small pad. We're going to need photos of the damage, and the drag marks, and the hitch pin. While he documented everything, Karen was pacing in frantic little circles, her hands shaking, her hair wild from the morning humidity and the sheer meltdown building inside her. I could hear her pleading with the other officer, her voice rising and cracking. You don't understand. He leaves things everywhere. He never follows the rules. I'm the only one who cares. Ma'am, Officer Hughes said patiently. None of that explains why your vehicle equipment appears to have been used to move and damage his property. It wasn't me, she blurted. Maybe a thief used it. At dawn, in a quiet cul-de-sac, using your vehicle, your gate, with drag marks leading directly from your yard. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out except a squeaky exhale. I almost felt bad. Almost. But the image of her smug face at my door 30 minutes earlier made sympathy evaporate like mist. The younger officer called over the senior one. Hughes, you'll want to see these pictures. He showed him the fresh scratches on the trailer, the bent hitch pin, the crushed patch of spring grass where the cart had skidded. Hughes frowned deeper with each image. Karen saw his expression and panicked. Look, this is all being blown out of proportion, she said, hands trembling as she smoothed her blouse. This is just a misunderstanding, a neighborly disagreement. He left the boat out, I noticed it, and, well, maybe I nudged it a little while rearranging my yard. You nudged a 2,000-pound boat across someone else's property? Her eyes flicked rapidly, calculating, searching for a version of the story that didn't sound like a felony. I was trying to help, she said desperately. It looked crooked. Both officers stared at her. Karen's voice grew thin and high. I was doing him a favor. Officer Hughes let out a slow breath. Ma'am, that's not how favors work. She swallowed hard, her entire body vibrating like a kettle ready to whistle. Are you implying I did something wrong? I'm saying we need the truth. But I am the truth. That line would have been funny if it weren't so terrifying. For a brief moment, an eerie silence settled over the cul-de-sac. Even the birds seemed to stop, as if the entire ecosystem was pausing to witness the downfall of the HOA queen. Then, from across the street, my neighbor Mrs. Ramirez poked her head out her window. Then Mr. Dalton stepped onto his porch, sipping coffee with the delight of a man who lived for neighborhood drama. Then the Mitchell kids peeked around the corner of their garage, whispering excitedly. Because if there was one thing suburban communities loved more than fresh cookies from Costco, it was watching Karen get humbled. Officer Hughes straightened. Ma'am, we're going to ask you directly. Did you or anyone in your household move this boat? Karen's jaw tightened. She breathed sharply through her nose. No, she said, enunciating every letter. And unless you have proof, you can't accuse me. Hughes studied her for a long moment, then tapped the side of his radio. Dispatch, can you send a unit to check exterior surveillance on No? Karen screamed. The officer paused. She suddenly deflated, shoulders collapsing inward. It was the first sign of actual vulnerability I had ever seen from her. Please, she whispered, don't involve anyone else. I can explain. Oh, there it was. The crack in the armor. Officer Hughes crossed his arms. We're listening. Karen closed her eyes and took a shaking breath. Fine. I moved it. But only because, Karen, a deep voice barked from behind us. We all turned. Her husband, Dan, stood in the doorway of their house in pajama pants and an old t-shirt, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. His expression was a perfect cocktail of exhaustion, resignation, and marital doom. Don't say anything else, he muttered, rubbing his eyes. Please. Dan, they're accusing me. No, he said. They're showing you the consequences. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. Consequences? She whispered. For trying to make the neighborhood better? Dan sighed. Karen, you woke me up at 5 a.m. asking how to start the yard cart. Every officer's eyebrows lifted. And when I asked why, he continued. You said you were going to fix the boat problem before he woke up. Karen's mouth hung open in horror. You betrayed me. I told you not to touch it. I told you to leave it alone. But you get so obsessed with these HOA things that you forget people actually live here. Karen's face twisted in disbelief. How can you say that? I enforce rules no one else cares about. Exactly, he said. No one else cares. The neighborhood held its breath. Someone on a nearby porch audibly whispered, "Oh damn." The officers exchanged a look. They didn't need to push further. The confession was loud enough for the property lines to hear. Hughes gestured toward the yard. Ma'am, based on what we've heard and seen, you'll be responsible for the property damage. We'll file a report. Whether charges follow is up to him. He nodded toward me. Karen's eyes snapped to mine, wild and desperate. You won't press charges, right? Right? I was helping. I'm the victim here. The victim? I echoed. Of what? Your own scheme. Your boat has been a nuisance for months. You leave it out sometimes, and the rules are clear, and the property values. I held up a hand. Karen, stop. She froze. Look around. Neighbors were watching. Officers were watching. Her husband avoided her gaze entirely. You didn't move that boat because you were helping. You moved it because you wanted control. You always want control. And you finally got caught. Her lip quivered. For the first time, she looked small. Officer Hughes turned to me. Sir, what would you like to do? Karen stared at me, eyes wide with a pleading intensity that might have worked on someone who hadn't just witnessed her attempt to frame him at dawn. I considered her. Considered the months of harassment. Considered the lectures, the threats of HOA fines, the snide comments about my lawn, my trash bins, my mailbox color. And then I thought about something else. Something she would never expect. The fact that mercy wasn't weakness. It was choice. I'm not pressing criminal charges, I said slowly. Karen gasped, a weird mix of relief and confusion. But, I continued, she pays for the damage. Every cent. And she publicly apologizes. Not just to me. I gestured at the street. To everyone she's bullied. Her face hardened. I will not. Then we move forward with charges. She stopped talking instantly. Her husband covered his face. The officers waited. Karen swallowed, staring at the ground. Fine, she whispered. No, Officer Hughes said. Say it clearly. She squeezed her eyes shut. Fine, I'll apologize. And you'll pay for the damages, I added. And I'll pay, she murmured. The entire neighborhood exhaled in unison, like a flock of birds relieved after a storm passes. But something told me this wasn't the end. Not yet. For the next hour, the officers documented everything. Measurements, photos, statements. One even helped me stabilize the trailer so the boat wouldn't roll further and cause more problems. Karen stood alone, arms wrapped around herself, trembling with anger or shame or both. Dan hovered nearby, but didn't speak to her. Not once. By the time the police wrapped up, a small cluster of neighbors had gathered, pretending to walk their dogs or water their lawns at the exact same moment. Karen had never looked more defeated. Officer Hughes gave me a last nod. Call us if you need anything else. And get that hitch fixed before you tow. I will. Thanks. They left. The cruiser slowly rolled down the street. The moment it turned the corner, the neighborhood buzzed like a shaken beehive. Mrs. Ramirez approached me first. Mi hijo, she said, shaking her head. You handled that with more patience than I would have. I would have aimed the boat at her house. I laughed. Glad you weren't steering. Then Mr. Dalton walked over. If you want help fixing the lawn, I've got seed in my garage. Also, I'm not saying I filmed the whole thing. But I'm also not saying it. You didn't. He grinned. I did. Karen, overhearing, groaned softly and covered her face. The Mitchell kids ran up next. Is she going to jail? Is she grounded? Can neighbors get grounded? No, I said. She's apologizing. They groaned, disappointed. Slowly, neighbors dispersed. Work, school, routines called them back. Drama had a half-life, and suburban life kept moving. Only Karen remained. She stared at the crushed grass, her eyes hollow. I sighed. Ready? She nodded stiffly. We walked toward the center of the street where a few neighbors lingered intentionally, pretending to check their mail or sweep a driveway. Karen glanced at them and whispered, Do we have to? Yes. She took a breath. I'm sorry, she said toward the ground. I crossed my arms. Karen. She forced herself to look up. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, she said louder. I moved the boat. I damaged his property. I shouldn't have done it. I've been difficult to a lot of you. A door opened across the street. Two more neighbors stepped out. Karen swallowed. I was wrong. The words looked like they physically hurt her. But she said them. And for the first time since she moved in, people actually listened. Even Dan finally looked at her, softening a little. Only a little. She finished, voice thin. I'll do better. Silence followed. Then, slowly, Mrs. Ramirez nodded. That's a start, she said. The others murmured agreement. Karen looked ready to collapse. I stepped forward. Thank you, I said simply. It was over. For now. Except it wasn't. Because 2 days later, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't Karen. It was the HOA, more specifically, the HOA president, Mark, an older man who preferred calm, reason, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee over drama of any kind. He held a clipboard. He looked uncomfortable. Morning, he said. Morning. I heard about what happened, he said. The board did too. I waited. He shifted awkwardly. Look, we've had complaints from multiple neighbors about her. For a long time. But without clear evidence, we couldn't do anything. The HOA isn't supposed to be a weapon. No kidding. He nodded. After the police report, the board met. We reviewed everything. And we need statements. About Karen? About her behavior. I blinked. Are you ejecting her from the HOA? He exhaled. No. But she might lose her board position. And her ability to enforce anything. Oh. For someone like her, that wasn't punishment. That was identity death. Will she know I contributed? I asked. Not directly. But she'll know someone did. I rubbed my temples. This was going to blow up again. I could feel it. But maybe it was time. Give me the forms, I said. He handed me the clipboard. As he left, he paused. For what it's worth. Thank you. People were afraid to stand up to her. I shrugged. I wasn't trying to make a statement. No, he said. But you did. He walked off. I closed the door. And I knew the storm wasn't over. Not even close. Because someone like Karen didn't lose power quietly. She exploded. And I braced myself. Because the final fallout would be far worse. And far more revealing. The fallout hit 3 days later. I should have known something was coming the moment I stepped outside and found Karen standing in my driveway. Stiff as steel, arms crossed, expression carved from pure resentment. Not angry. Not panicked. Something worse. Determined. Morning, I said warily. We need to talk, she replied. Ah, yes. The 4 most dangerous words in the English language. I closed the door behind me. All right. Her jaw tightened. The HOA board removed me from enforcement duties. I nodded. Yeah. I heard. You gave them a statement. You asked me to choose between pressing charges and holding you accountable. That's not what you were supposed to do, she snapped, her voice rising. You were supposed to let it go? Just let it go. I stared at her. Karen, you dragged a boat across my yard at 5:30 in the morning. It wasn't supposed to get this big, she said, trembling. I just wanted order. I just wanted people to follow the rules. You bent a metal hitch to prove a point. She opened her mouth and closed it again. Silence stretched between us, heavy, thick, suffocating. Finally, her shoulders sagged. They're making me go through conflict resolution training, she muttered. With the HOA mediator. That sounds like a good first step, I said carefully. Her eyes flashed with something sharp. You don't get it. This neighborhood depends on people like me. Without rules, everything falls apart. People get sloppy. Yards get messy. Boats stay out. People stop caring. And dragging someone's property in the dark is caring? She winced. Why does it matter so much to you? I asked. Why rules? Why control? Her voice dropped. Because if I don't control things, she murmured, things fall apart. Her hands shook. And when things fall apart, no one is safe. It was the first time she'd ever said anything remotely real. And suddenly, I wasn't looking at a tyrant with a clipboard. I was looking at someone who had spent her entire adult life holding the world together with sheer force of will because the alternative terrified her. But sincerity didn't erase consequences. She took a breath, steadying herself. The board removed my voting privileges for 6 months. There, reevaluating my position. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry it's been rough. No, you're not, she said, eyes filling with a strange wet shine. You wanted this. Yes, I said honestly. Because it needed to happen. Her mouth twitched in pain. For a moment, she looked like she might argue again. But then something in her broke. The fight drained out of her. Do you hate me? She whispered. The question caught me off guard. No, I said. I don't hate you. Everyone else does. People don't hate you. I said. They just needed you to stop hurting them. Her chin quivered. And what about you? She managed. I sighed. I needed you to stop hurting me. We stood there in the morning like 2 people who had spent months locked in a ridiculous suburban war finally, staring at the wreckage. She brushed a tear angrily off her cheek. Not sadness. Humiliation. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said. I really did. I believe you, I said. But doing the right thing means checking if it's right for others, not just right for you. She blinked hard. Then she straightened her spine. I'll pay for the damages. All of it. The hitch. The lawn. The siding scrape. I called the repair company yesterday. That's good, I said softly. She nodded once, sharply. And I spoke to Dan. Is he okay? He's frustrated. With me. With everything. She paused. But he said he's willing to go to counseling. He wants us to try. That's good, I repeated. It is, she said quietly. A long silence followed. Finally, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen from her before. Not anger. Not superiority. Not condescension. Just honesty. Thank you, she said. For what? For forcing me to face myself. She swallowed. No one else ever has. And before I could respond, she turned and walked back to her house, her steps slow, uncertain, almost fragile. For the first time since she moved in, she looked human. Spring drifted into summer, and the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Kids biking, sprinklers ticking, lawnmowers humming on Saturday mornings. Karen kept her distance for a while, not out of spite, out of respect. She stopped patrolling the cul-de-sac. She stopped sending passive-aggressive reminder letters. She stopped organizing unwanted community inspections. She even replanted her hydrangeas. One afternoon, as I repaired the trailer hitch with a friend's help, Karen stepped outside. Not to watch, not to correct, just to exist in the world like everyone else. When our eyes met, she lifted her hand in a small, cautious wave. I waved back. Some wounds didn't need reopening. Some battles didn't need refighting. And some stories didn't end with revenge, they ended with understanding, growth, and the slow rebuilding of something that looked suspiciously like peace. The real twist came weeks later, though, when the HOA sent its monthly newsletter. And right there, printed in clean serif font under community updates, new HOA rule: unauthorized movement of a neighbor's property, for any reason, will result in automatic fines and board review. I stared at the line for a long time before laughing out loud. The HOA had learned. The neighborhood had learned. And even Karen had learned. As ridiculous as the whole saga had been, from the dawn boat dragging to the police investigation to the emotional reckoning, something good had come of it. Something real. People looked out for each other more. They stood up for themselves more. And the cul-de-sac finally felt like a community. A month later, on a crisp Saturday morning, as I hitched the newly repaired boat for a fishing trip, Karen stepped out holding a cup of coffee. She hesitated, then walked over. Going fishing? She asked. Yeah. Want some fish when I get back? She managed a small, crooked smile. Only if it's not a violation. I chuckled. No rules against generosity. She nodded. Good. And in that simple exchange, everything felt settled. Not perfect. Not erased. But settled. The feud was over. And the neighborhood finally breathed again. The boat sat steady on the trailer. The yard was healed. The street was quiet. And Karen, no longer the tyrant of the HOA, sipped her coffee, staring out at a world she was finally learning to live in, not control. A new chapter. For all of us. Thank you for listening to the stories on my channel. Please give me a like and subscribe to receive notifications about the latest videos.